Hi, and this is Pyjama Talks in the field, and we are at WebExpo conference. And today our guest is Eric Reiss. Hi, Ray.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
Could you please tell viewers who you are?
I am the CEO of a design group called the FatDUX Group. We primarily design user experience. I have an American accent because I was born in the United States, but I also hold German and Danish citizenship, and I've lived in Denmark for the past 45 years.
You have impressive portfolio of projects. You designed a lot of things like airlines, right? You work with the airlines.
We've certainly worked with a lot of airlines. And I don't mean to be secretive or to be difficult, but we do have non-disclosure agreements with most of our clients, and so I can't really get into a lot of the specifics. And I have some good war stories, but I have to be very careful to anonymize them so that they can't be traced back.
What would you talk about? Already talked about.
I talked about creating a shared frame of reference. This is something that I've been speaking to people about for 25, 26 years now. And it's very sad because companies don't get it. Quite simply, if I say I'm holding in my hand a standard 60-watt light bulb with an E27 screw-in base, Edison 27 millimeter, which was the standard that he introduced in 1909. I mean, we all know what I've got in my hand. It's a standard 60-watt light bulb, right? Wrong. What color is it?
Like transparent?
Oh, it could be frosted, it could be purple. Is it burned out, or does it work? Is it LED?
I don't know.
Is it 110 volt? Is it 230 volt?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, so these are all the things that I didn't answer. And when people provide content for a website, particularly an e-commerce site, the descriptions are really pretty awful. And not to speak of any Swedish furniture dealers that use the colors yellow and blue, but it's very difficult to figure out how long their sofas are. You really have to dig around, get dimensions on IKEA's furniture. And IKEA is a very good company and they have a good website, but there's some basic things that could be a lot better.
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean by creating shared frames of reference. So the talk was about, so what do we do in terms of the written content? What do we do in terms of graphics and images? What do we do in terms of sound? And if that's the human side of the coin, the other side of the coin is machines. Machines need metadata. We're talking about all these wonderful AI engines that are going to do this and that. Well, hey, I have a picture in my slides of a pub sign from England where it says, "The Squirrel," and there's a big picture of a rooster. Now that's very funny if you're in England, but if an AI bot thinks, a rooster and a squirrel are the same thing, then you've got trouble. And Google certainly ran into problems because it does not know how to categorize people of color. And so if you have a dark skin tone, Google has made some criminal mistakes in terms of identifying who or what is in the picture. So we've got to provide metadata. We've got to make sure that the machines understand what's going on. And despite deep neural networks, and we're still talking about binary code. It's on, off, 1, 0. A lot of the AI choices are not black or white. And this is a problem that we need to address. And then finally, there's the ethical question. What do we do? MIT, the Media Lab, the MIT Media Lab has a game, and it's on their site, where you're asked ethical questions about self-driving cars. And the example I used this morning was, here we have a self-driving car with 5 passengers. The brakes have failed, and it's headed toward a concrete barrier. If it hits the barrier, all 5 of the occupants are going to die. The alternative is to swerve into the crosswalk, in which case they'll kill 3 people. So what do you do? This is not an easy question.
Even for a human.
No, even for a human. We'd probably try to make the car spin or do something. The self-driving cars are not very smart. And our job as designers, as developers, is to do the thinking that the poor car can't do for us. And if we don't do the thinking, who's going to do the thinking for us? That's a big problem.
How can we see an elephant? Because like right now, almost every startup or any big corporation, they have like this development cycles. We have to eat elephant piece by piece, and it's the same with the design. We don't have one designer per company, per product. We have a bunch of different designers, and they sometimes they can't see the whole picture and how to solve this problem.
I had an interesting project a couple of years ago where there was a development company in Copenhagen that asked me to help with a user experience strategy. And I worked with a very talented information architect. We did our wireframes, we did all our work, and this was handed off to a designer. Dark gray text on a black background in a very thin font that you couldn't read. I mean, the whole thing was very designed and absolutely unusable. I think the things do need to be usable first, and pretty comes way down the line. If I go to an airline website and I need a boarding pass, I kind of don't care whether it's pretty. I want to know whether I can click on a button, and a well-designed button, and to get my boarding pass. And so there have to be some priorities too. And this comes from leadership. I used to think that when my generation died off, things would get better. Well, now 20 years later, I'm 67 years old, and I see people in their late 40s and 50s, and they're still making mistakes that we had identified back in 1994. And it can be very frustrating. So I guess it's not just my generation. There's something else broken in the process. And I think it may be that the people who are really in charge, the people on the very top level of things, are not really paying attention to the web or online things. I mean, we don't need more apps. We need to improve this business of shared reference. I swear, I think 80% of the usability problems that I come across are because people just don't understand what they're expected to do. We go into elevators that have very strange buttons, and we don't know where we're supposed to poke to get to the floor we want. The pandemic, if anything positive has come out of it, everybody has bought stuff online, and everyone has experienced the same frustration of how long is that IKEA sofa? Why do people abandon shopping carts? Because that's the only place you can figure out how much the postage is, the shipping is going to cost. There are a lot of things that suddenly companies are taking seriously. They know that e-commerce does work. It can be very viable, and it certainly worked during the last 18 months. And the other interesting thing is that companies figured out people really can work from home and are often much more effective. So hopefully we will see better conferencing tools so that we truly can have good virtual meetings, things that take Zoom and whatever to the next level, because these are fine products for what they are. They're not what we need yet, but they can be better. So I think that we've learned a lot. Now it's a question of taking that learning and turning it into something that produces long-term value.
It can be a problem in implementation. So for example, like designers design beautiful things, beautiful interfaces, but does them developers, they develop everything but except of the beautiful design. Like there is a Bible, really nice book, but somehow we don't live the same maybe the problem is in implementation, because designers, they design but they don't implement.
I think part of the problem is that designers are not very good at communicating their view to the rest of the team. And despite Scrum and I don't know how many different models one has, it's still basically a waterfall process. They do their bit and they hand it off to the next person, who hands it off to the next person. I, with new clients, have tried very hard to get developers and designers and others to come to these meetings. I don't want people to tell me, oh, well, that client is stupid.
Sure.
He doesn't understand what's going on. The clients are not stupid. They're uninformed. And it's our job to help educate them. And if I don't want the developer telling me 2 months down the road, well, this is a really stupid idea. I want him to understand from the first meeting why the company wants this or is thinking as they are. And when that has happened, if you can get a team assembled, or at least the team leaders, both from dev and from design and the information architects, content people, if you can get them all to listen to the cranky old CEO say, this is what we want to do, or the marketing director, or whoever it is who's dictating this, it helps the project a lot. And all the other meetings are much easier because people do have a common base. They have a shared frame of reference. They've all been to the same meeting.
And maybe with this, we will not have to have separated designers. Maybe in the future, everyone will be a little bit of a designer.
Oh, I think we already are
Yeah.
all designers. We just don't necessarily call ourselves designers.
We still have different words on our wages and in our salary, probably.
That's true. I think the greatest crime is that there's so much gender and racial discrimination in our business. I mean, here we're a couple of white guys talking, but women, people of color, have a tough time in our industry. There are not enough of them yet, and they're not getting paid what they're entitled to. And I certainly think about it as somebody who runs a company, and have worked very hard to get women involved.
Yeah.
Now I live in Denmark, and so in terms of people of color, well, I mean, there's just not a lot that work in my industry. I mean, they're not out there to hire, but certainly there are women, and I do hire them. It's important, and it's certainly something that our industry is thinking a lot about. They're just not thinking enough about it. There are people who will scream and yell and use cuss words. That's all well and good, and it's all very dramatic, but it's not necessarily changing our industry. I think that change happens in more subtle ways.
Sometimes I've heard it that design is not that hard, and this is probably most easiest profession that you can come to IT, for example, in IT field. Like, just, I don't know, paint some buttons in different colors and that's it. Is it true or no?
Well, it's true to some extent. I mean, I know people who work in a UX department and all they do is design buttons.
Yeah.
But their skills are much broader than that. You don't need a whole department to design a couple of buttons.
Yeah. If you are interviewing a designer, like, what skills are most important for you?
Oh, I want to know, what problem did you solve? How did you identify it? What kind of research did you do? How did you figure out that this was a problem that needed solving? And what did you do to solve it?
Yeah.
And if they just show me pretty portfolio pictures, I say, well, this is all well and good, but what was the goal? How did this particular design solve things in a better way than, say, another design? Do you have any measurement of the outcome?
This is a good question. And does it mean that, for example, designers, they should know something about statistics, about maybe kind of big data or something, user engagement and other stuff, maybe some tech background?
Well, yeah, I think it helps to know a little bit about a lot of things. It doesn't mean you have to be an expert statistician, but you need to be able to look at some numbers and see, okay, this is interesting. In terms of big data, though, we're collecting lots of data, and a lot of it is not particularly interesting. It's a question of pattern recognition and having that one good insight, like, okay, this is cool, this is a pattern, this is something that our data set is telling us. And I swear, I mean, one good insight is worth 1,000 data points.
Yeah, for sure. It's like right now we have so many data, so much data, like from heat maps, how user clicks your interface, but it's too much sometimes.
Yeah, it's kind of a forest and trees situation. Like, what are you looking at? It can be very difficult to go through huge amounts of data, but it can be done, and people do it, and they make money off it. And this is where the AI algorithms are going to start to help, because they do spot patterns. And I can't remember all the details, but there was a hospital. The computer could spot patterns that the physicians were not, and they could head off, I want to say Alzheimer's, but I don't think that that was the disease they were working with. But the thing is, there are interesting patterns that we as humans haven't seen yet, and hopefully AI will be able to help us with this. And so the big data is, of course, useful, but it can also be blinding and often misleading. You have to learn how to interpret the data.
Right now, everything is online, and it opens a wide window of opportunities for businesses like e-commerce, digital. But on the other hand, everyone, even if you don't want to, you should go online. And sometimes it can lead to companies that never thought about going online. They're like, okay, we need a website, we will develop it ourselves because we don't have money or whatever, and they developing the shittiest website in the universe.
I think it is a hybrid. I need a new laptop, and because I live in Denmark, I want a Danish keyboard. Danish has 3 letters that are not in the standard 26 letter alphabet. And what happens is sometimes the manufacturers put these keys in such a way that they make the shift button on the right half size. I type with all 10 fingers, and if they do that, invariably I hit an arrow button or I do something else rather than hitting the shift button. So I can't buy computers online. I need to see them in person and see them with the keyboard. Every website you go to uses the standard pretty American pictures that don't show a local keyboard. You can't even go in and say, oh, well, show me the German keyboard, show me the Czech keyboard, show me the Polish keyboard, show me the... These are all different keyboards, and it's relevant, but they haven't recognized that yet. So I go to the store where I can actually see computers. I don't necessarily get the best one, but I'll buy the one that I can actually see.
Yeah, that's true.
So the hybrid solution is important.
As a manager, would you prefer to be everyone in the same room with your team and manage them directly, or remote is totally okay?
I think if the remote tools were a little better, then I wouldn't have a problem. But right now, bringing people virtually into another meeting, if everybody's on Zoom, then everybody's on Zoom. But if you have half on Zoom and half in the room, it can be very difficult to interact. And so this is a challenge.
The last question about the conference. So online conference or offline conference?
I'm looking at this as an offline conference. I'm here because I get to interact with you, I get to meet people, I get to see friends I haven't seen in several years. I think it's important not to just to be on a stage and talk, but also to interact with the audience and also to talk with people in the breaks. And I think that the organizers have done a brilliant job of arranging meeting places and round tables and long breaks between talks so that people can network.
Last one, like advice to people who just coming to the industry as a designer probably, or maybe not only designer, maybe, I don't know, what, because I think right now the big problem is that tech, IT and all industry is super huge, and it is extremely hard to start from something. So what is, I don't know, one advice you can give to people who's just joining?
We're all basically making this up as we go along. This is a very young industry. We have challenges today that we certainly didn't have 2 years ago. If you're good at your work, if you've learned the basics, if you know how to program, if you know how to design, or whatever it is you want to do, go with the flow. Don't assume that you know everything. Don't assume that the old people like me, just because we don't happen to code C+, doesn't mean that we didn't learn Fortran back in 1968. We kind of understand how computers think. So don't discount us. And by the same token, the people who are my age shouldn't discount the people who are 20 years old or younger and are self-taught, because some of them are extremely creative and they don't have a history of we're doing it the way we always have done it. They said, well, this is stupid, let's do it this way. And some of those solutions, that's where innovation is. That is really, really interesting. So if you're young and if you're interested, work hard and don't put up with the people who say, you're too junior, you don't have anything to say in this. That's wrong. If your manager says that to you, it's time to start looking for a new job.
Yeah, and with this, we're ending this day, and it was Eric Reiss. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.